Now, imagine a continent where traveling is visa-free. It's easy to trade, travel for summits, connect, and network. Would it be nice to have that? Well, African leaders are beginning to see the possibility of that. Not just that, some countries have begun to take actions regarding that as well. Seychelles, Benin, and the Gambia led the movement, and soon after, Kenya and Rwanda joined in. Now, this would mostly benefit the youth, according to the president of Kenya, William Ruto. In his words, to grow fast, we must deliberately focus on innovation to create fresh opportunities through the creation of new products, models, and partnerships. But that notwithstanding, there's still certain challenges that come with the visa-free, borderless Africa, and we'll definitely explore that in a minute. Well, to join us have this conversation, first I'm joined by Kirabo Marion, a women rights activist in Kampala, Uganda. Thank you so much, Kirabo, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
My pleasure. Well, with me in the studio, I also have Asemota, Executive Director, African Youth in Agribusiness Organization. Thank you so much, Uyi, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. All right, Kirabo, I'm going to start with you. How do you believe that the visa-free travel in Africa would impact the continent's youth?
Well, like you have said that though we signed the African Continental Free Trade Agreement a few years back, it's only now that African countries or African governments are warming up to the idea of a visa-free African continent. Well, when it comes to us youth, I would say that the opportunities are many, especially for, let me say, a country like Uganda that is quite landlocked. It will mean that we will be able to trade freely in a less expensive, let me say, economy when it comes to, let me say, transport costs. For example, for us, in Uganda, are you still hearing me?
Yes, I can. Please go ahead.
Yes. Okay. My connection is unstable, so you'll bear with me. It will mean that the cost of trading in a country like Uganda will be much less, will be cut down by almost 50%. Because if you look at the fact that even in our country, taxes are quite high in Uganda, but then you have to go through Kenya to access the international market. Going through Kenya means that you have to go through their border, you have to pay certain taxes, but then also road tariffs from the border to the port. Even when it comes to decide to use airport, we know that cost of air transport in Africa is quite high. And it's really baffling that the cost for traveling or transporting goods around Africa is much more expensive than it would be for other foreigners. For example, studies and reports show that in over at least there are 54 countries Africans cannot fully travel in, and North Americans, for example, can travel much easier across the African continent than us. So for us young people, a borderless Africa means that there is a less expensive or less expensive economic burden on trading. When there's a less economic burden on trading, it means that the cost of production lowers. Cost of production lowers, increase in goods and services, increase in trading creates more employment opportunities, businesses, African businesses. But for us in Uganda, we have a saying that your business cannot succeed beyond 1 year, and it's because of the high cost of trading. So when we cut the high cost of trading, it means that Africans and African entrepreneurs can better sustain their businesses and grow their businesses. When they grow their businesses, they grow the economy. They grow the economy, that means more jobs for African people. So it's good news for us as the African people.
All right, thank you for that, Kirabo. Now, I'm going to come to you now, Uyi. You're the Executive Director for Africa Youth in Agribusiness Organization. From that perspective, what do you think the major benefits will be for, of youths and entrepreneurs in businesses, to have a borderless travel or trading with other African countries?
Yeah, I think it's numerous. Right? I am one of those that are particularly very excited about the call. There have been various calls in the past to have a united Africa. I think Omeko must have started with, let's have a united Africa. I think it's long overdue because I work within the West African belt. Let's even take the West African belt, for example. It is quite, now you don't even have the visa restriction, for example.
Yeah. But
you still have these bureaucracies around movement of persons and goods. Notwithstanding the treaty that says free movement of persons and goods. Mm-hmm. Most of the persons I talk with when I'm talking with some of these trade organizations, I usually say the fact that Africa can sustain itself if we can trade within ourselves, if we have a free trading within ourselves. It is laughable that I cannot produce in Nigeria, for example, and sell freely in Niger Republic because I can't take it across. I can't even take my staffs across without having a kind of like a bottleneck you have to go through. There is no visa restriction, for example, but there's just that invisible restriction that you have to go through. So it's going to, a borderless Africa is going to grow Africa. Most of the time when we talk about exports, especially in the agribusiness sector, and we go through a whole lot of bottlenecks, trying to standardize our products to meet the European market that is open to us, because it is laughable that Kenya market, for example, is not open to our maize, bananas and the rest. They are not open to us. But these people, will, if you look at the way our products are segmented, I don't need so much, I don't need so much stuff to be done to make my product fit for the Ghana market. But you will not allow me bring my product to Ghana freely because of the bottleneck. Nobody is stopping you. But if you want to embark on it, you will not see the bureaucracies that will cut you off entirely. So if we can actually sell within ourselves, we can even sustain ourselves. So before we even think of exporting to places like Europe and America, where we talk about phytochemical analysis and start telling you about today, add this fertilizer, tomorrow, this content is not too much. Let's just produce and sell to ourselves. That will go a long way to help the continent. Secondly, I remember when I was to go for World Forestry Congress to represent the youth in South Africa, in Durban, South Africa, I was meant to go for visa interview. I was denied visa. ITTO paid for my flight tickets, my accommodation over there, and my flight ticket was gotten 2 months before I applied. I was denied visa. Up to this moment, ITTO cannot understand why an African, and being that I am traveling from Africa, going to South Africa for a conference that is well known, and I was denied visa. That discouraged me a whole lot. That even after that time, when you say anything about South Africa, I don't want to think about it. So that stifles a whole lot of creativity. If I'm thinking of something for the Kenya market, I'm thinking of something for the Uganda market, in my creative table, I'm going to keep thinking about the restriction that I'll have to go through. And that will stifle what I can do and what I want to do. And if you look at the fintech market, for example, it is laughable that, for example, there is GTB in Ghana and there is GTB in Nigeria. I cannot access my fund from GTB Ghana and GTB Nigeria. They don't have a link.
Wow.
So how do you sell? Even when you say, okay, let me take these goods over there and sell, there is just this bottleneck about being able to get your funds. So you see most of these traders, most of these manufacturers, losing both ways. They lose when they buy and they exchange. When you now sell over there, you have to convert from CDs. I'm using Ghana and Nigeria now. So at the end of the day, it's really not favorable. So, but if there is a borderless Africa, we'll not worry about that, right? There will be no such restrictions, and the youth will be put in position to think, if what I'm thinking is not favorable for this market. For example, what you call innovation over here in Chad, for example, can be something that has been happening here over 10 years. So what stops the youth that have that creative here to move down there, make it work, and make the economy grow.
Right.
So those restrictions are, them not being there is going to go a long way to help Africa, and I think it's a welcome development. Yeah.
It is indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Now, let me come back to Kirabo. Now, Kirabo, there's still some certain factors that should be considered. For example, when we talk about the issue of cultural exchange and promoting understanding, in what ways could this open borders foster the greater cultural exchange and the understanding among the youths in Africa? Kirabo, I think your device is muted again.
So can you hear me now?
Yes, please.
So when we're handling the issue of cross-border trade, cross-border movement, I think it's before we, let me say, rush forward, there are certain things that we need to look at. We have this, we need to look at why it has become very difficult for us to get to this point. And I give you, for example, here, the panelist talks about, my fellow panelists talk about the fact that in South Africa, it was very hard for him to get a visa. But we keep on being awash on our television screens of the sort of xenophobia that is going on, especially immigrants, African immigrants from other countries who have tried to come to the South African market, try to better their odds when it comes to trade and, start up small businesses and across. And when we embark on this journey, I think that more and more of those incidences will come up because those sentiments do come up in a free movement economy, because you look at Brexit, if you look at what the European Union is going through, some of the difficulties and the challenges that we're going to face is the fact that African countries, because most of us are not very technologically maybe advanced, and most of Africa is an agricultural economy, you are going to find that most of these countries are trading in relatively the same products. They're not different, relatively the same agricultural products. And that becomes a challenge because if you are giving me what I already have, there will be a lot of influx in the market of goods in excess that all of us have. So it's like almost there is nothing that you're adding on me. I'm not saying that it will happen in every situation where it's like that, but I'm just giving it as an example. So it would, that means that when we are going on to this mission of free movement, we need to look at some aspects. One, how issues of how we protect, let me say, for a country like Uganda, and how we protect the Ugandan market so that perhaps Ugandans don't feel like these foreigners are coming into our country and they are taking on opportunities that should have been for Ugandan people, just like we have seen in South Africa. Or things like, we are both trading in milk. Let me say Uganda and Kenya are both trading in milk. So we are competing for the milk market. And then suddenly Kenya feels like Uganda is okay, their market is being awash with Ugandan milk, and somehow their Kenyan suppliers are not getting enough market. And then you start seeing Kenya putting tariffs on Uganda. Those are some of the things that we may have to look on. It's not just a matter of saying, let us have free trade and let everyone move. Of course, that's the first step in ensuring that we can grow our African economy. But there are some of these things that we need to, some of these questions that we need to answer. How do we make sure that when these visas are available, when this free movement is available, the people in our countries, the citizens of their respective countries, do not feel like this policy of letting in, let me say, their fellow Africans into their country is is going to take away their jobs or their opportunities or all the resources that they had. So there needs to be that even when we are allowing free trade, there is need to protect, let me say, local business people. If you're coming into the country as, let me say, a Nigerian investor, how are you working? If you're a Nigerian company and you want to trade goods in Uganda, how are you working with the Ugandan population? That they will not feel that you're coming in maybe to just come and trade and be a hawker or start up a kiosk in Uganda, which they feel like a normal Ugandan can do. Are you getting me? It's not to say that Africans should not be free to trade and engage in any trade in any country. I'm just saying that we need to also answer some of these queries that come from people. A lot of politicians rush it off, and I see from South Africans' case that, oh, you cannot chase away fellow Africans. We are one continent. There is brotherhood, but you also need to understand where people come from. The fact that economic situations are so bad in most African countries, but also when you look at the aspect of Europe, these sentiments are not only in African countries, but even in Europe. The times are hard and people are struggling, and they're seeing perhaps the little opportunities that they feel should belong to them being taken away. I think when we're looking at free movement of people, we should also keep these things in mind. How do we operate in such a way that doesn't look exploitative?
Okay, we'll come back to continue the conversation, Kirabo. Thank you. I want us to take a quick look at some of the things that tweeps are saying on social media, so we can get a hang of what people feel about it, and then we'll continue the conversation. All right, now it's Dave says, I actually did enjoy this. Africa needs more intra-trades to grow. Africa needs to fast pace its manufacturing sector growth, and Asia, Europe, and the United States should be secondary export destinations with African countries as primary. Investments in modernization and partnerships have been significant. Key countries like Morocco, Kenya, South Africa, Ivory Coast, Togo, Cameroon are leading the way. Challenges remain, but improving efficiency is vital for intra-African trade. How about the entire Africa being one country, with one military, with one currency tied to our mineral resources, with rails crossing everywhere, promoting intra-African trade and tourism? Africa Visa Openness Index 2023. Africa has made impressive progress in visa openness to ease cross-border travel, boost intra-African trade, investment, and regional integration, but room for improvement remains huge. Parliament of Zimbabwe says intra-African trade is a key factor for Africa's economic growth and development. Africa is endowed with abundant natural and human resources, but it remains marginalized in the global trade ecosystem, accounting for a paltry 2% of the world trade. Moreover, intra-African trade is very low, representing only 15% of the total trade, compared to 58% in Asia and 67% in Europe. All right, let me come to you now. Would you agree that I do understand the context from which the other lady talking about Africa being one country, is speaking from. So would you agree that if this is successfully done, the visa restrictions are taken out, the dependence on imports from other countries will greatly reduce? Would you agree?
I think it will greatly reduce. I think my fellow discussant was talking about the fact that we need to guide the inflow of goods. I'm producing same goods, you're producing same goods. Don't bring it to my country and just stuff like it might mess up my economy. I really don't think that will be the case to a very large extent. Because if you look at the map of Africa and the different areas the countries are a bit kind of like specialized in, you will see that it will be easy to control some of those inflows and outflows. They're different from my research and from the work I've been doing. I know most of these countries have different organizations that can manage this. So it's just to give them the blueprint for this to operate. And that UNISM, I know the security aspect of it will be huge, kind of like you need to think about a whole lot of stuff. Most African countries are grappling with a whole lot of security issues. By the time you now make it free movement and every of those stuff, there are bound to be some of those concerns. But I believe that most of these countries have already mechanism in place. I think somebody talked about why not just make Africa a whole country and then one person ruling everywhere, one police, and I don't think that would be possible because politics has really eaten deep into Africa. Maybe if it was during Kwame Nkrumah, I think that was even what destroyed that ideology at that time. Nobody wants to be the single leader and any of those stuff. So that might be a problem. That might not work. But in our diversity as countries, we can still come together and still make this work. Not minding the security challenges. I even feel the security challenges will be reduced to a very large extent because if every country effectively mount their system and their borders, it will be easy. You remember the last time that Nigeria soldiers, it was reported Nigeria soldiers wandered into Niger Republic, then they were arrested. If we didn't have those kind of stuff, that will not happen. If we have those borderless stuff, that will not happen. So I think it will go a long way. It's just the systems we need to start thinking about the system to make these things work instead of thinking of the obstacles that might make this not work. And over the years, we'll be able to make this effective. It's a nice one, and I think every country should latch into it because now we are talking about Africa Free Trade Agreement. It cannot work if we have border restrictions. Right. We are talking. I believe now that one of the reasons that the free movement of persons and goods in ECOWAS did not work is as a result of some of these border restrictions. Just go and cross ECOWAS border and you see what it is. So that bottleneck alone is enough to make sure that that entire beautiful treaty did not work, and it has not been working so far. And that's spiraled into both the security, spiral into all the bilateral agreements and all of those stuff. So I think if the security could effectively be taken care of, and the economic stability of each country can easily be managed by the countries based on the existing laws. Remember, the World Trade Organization is there, and all of this. I think another thing would be the currency aspect of this whole thing. Maybe that is the reason some of these leaders are calling for, okay, let's even regionalize it. Let the Southern Africa region have same currency. Let the West Africa have same currencies because just look at the disparity between CFA and Naira and CD right now. So maybe if there is a unification of currency, we won't have this case of one country trying to suppress the other country and stuff like that. We know we spend the same thing. So we can actually also now unify pricing because pricing is another aspect that affects this whole thing. So maybe if our currencies are a bit kind of like unified or we have a way of marrying it to be able to also control pricing as the case may be,
Right, okay, thank you. I'm gonna ask Kirabo the last question for this segment. Now, Kirabo, I would like to find out I think I'm just gonna, we just got wind of the fact that Kirabo is having issues with our connection. So I'm gonna ask you the final question. Of course, with every development, there are perks, but there are also challenges. So what challenges do you foresee, in terms of unifying, I won't say unifying the continent, but at least making travel easier, taking out the visa completely so people can travel easily. What are some challenges that you foresee? I
think there might be initial restriction, there might be initial kind of like resistance because, most countries now have this superiority and inferiority complex, right? So some countries feel they are more powerful and every of those stuff. So you might have to do a lot to kind of like crumble that. Then security, I mentioned security initially. Security will be one thing that some countries will use as excuse to be able to remember Nigeria used that to close border against Niger Republic, which was counterproductive. So they are going to use security to a very large extent. And the influence of persons from countries that seem as if they are less privileged to that seems that more privileged countries. For example, I know South Africa is going to get a whole lot of influence of persons from, let's say, Zimbabwe, for example, and stuff like that. I think those might be some of the challenges that will kind of like want to drag back the implementation of the system. But in all this, I still feel that this whole can be managed, because if it might be difficult the first few years, right? But I know that with time this will settle. If Europe could do it, if the EU could do it, now you have the Schengen visa, everybody is one and stuff like. If they could do it, I think we can do it. We are even more refer to ourselves as brothers and every of this. So I think it can actually work. Not minding some of these pockets of different stuff that we think could potentially affect you, which security is top on the list, and the currency, the evaluation or currency unification thing. So those are some of the challenges I think will certainly kind of like affect it. And in terms of the youth trying to channel their energy, I know when they're talking about some of these things now, you want to talk about the fact that there is this, I'm sorry to say that, there is this underlining beef, for example, I will just use it at a lighter note, between the youth of Ghana, for example, and the youth of Nigeria.
Yes.
Feel, oh no, you can't outsmart me.
Especially online.
It is always kind of crazy. I think that might be one of the challenges that will kind of want to affect this, but I know with time it will fizzle out.
Right.
Because when there are no ceiling that anybody is trying to cross, and we are all working towards one goal, I think every of these things will
learn to work together.
Work together.
Okay, I'm just going to get Kirabo's final thought, because we're out of time. But Kirabo, what do you hope that Africa can achieve with the entire visa ban thing? We know that not all African countries have adopted it, and we know that it might be quite difficult to get every African country. But say that it's a thing that happens. So what do you hope that the continent can achieve? Kirabo, you're muted again.
The thing that I hope for most is that this is just one step in the many steps we have to take in African unity as a continent. As a continent, collectively, we have how can I say, we have a disadvantage on the global scale as individual African countries. And the only way we can increase our strength or our power, be it economically, be it politically, even be it socially, is if we are united and not just stand as, let me say, 54 separate African countries. No individual African country can survive on its own on the global scale. So I am hoping that with this move towards a borderless country, that we as Africans can find more things in common, and we could have the pride in ourselves to say that we can stand together. And with that unity, perhaps we will start to see a change in our position in the world as an African continent. One thing that unites Black people is the way that the world sees us. So we are the only race, perhaps, and one African person cannot maybe, let me say, racially be racist against an African person. You get there's a lot of, on the global scales, there's this image that Africa has, and the exploitation that we have gone through as a continent. And I feel like some of those challenges, neocolonialism, exploitation, poverty, disease, famine, let me say, climate change, all the things that affect us that we not necessarily have control over. We can only start to overcome all those things if we are united as a continent. And the only way we can be united as a continent is that if we go past these, let me say, colonial borders that have kept us separate from a long time, if we go through these shackles of disunity that was sowed during the times that we were under our colonial masters. And I think that trade is one way to do that. So I am hoping it's just one element of a plan to unite Africa in order to look towards a prosperous and more successful continent.
Okay. I want to say a big thank you to my studio guest, Uyi Asemota, Executive Director, African Youth in Agribusiness Organization in Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
And also, I want to say thank you to Kirabo Marion, a women rights activist in Kampala, Uganda. Thank you, Kirabo, for also joining us.
There you are.
All right, you're still watching Fafanu Africa. When we come back, we're still on our creativity series, and we're going to be looking at creativity, but this time through the lens of another creative. Stay tuned to find out.